Greetings, everybody. Welcome back to our channel, Scientology Peeling the Onion. My name is Mark Fisher, and I'm here with my co-host, Janis Gillham Grady. How you doing today, Janis?
Aloha, Mark, and g'day, everybody. I'm doing good. I'm excited about today's episode. I'm excited every time we do this because I'm really enjoying reconnecting with people and talking about old times. And
Well, I was going to say, we've had some really great guests over like the last 4 or 5 weeks. We had Candy Swanson, we had Belle Farage, right? We had Stuart Moreau. We've had Spanky Taylor, and all these people are like, and Tori Chrisman, and we're talking to all these old friends and people that you knew on the Apollo, and I wasn't on the Apollo, so it's been very enlightening for me, and our viewers, I think, have really enjoyed it too, because we've gotten really great comments on some of the guests, and they'll be returning. We're going to do another video with Belle here in another couple of days, and Stuart is also going to come back again and all that. But it's thanks to you, Janis, that we're getting all these people.
Because I just love my friends and staying in touch with them and reconnecting. It's great.
That's right. Well, go ahead. Do you want to introduce our new guest, because this is another great guest for us?
Yes, it is. And I know you've talked with her before, but this is a special one for me because our guest is Karen de la Carriere, and Karen and I have a long history together. In 1973, when we were on the Apollo, she was there as public, and I had a message run to her to ask her from the Commodore to join the Sea Organization. So I had to go off and find her in the lower decks, and I did, and she accepted. And from that point, she stayed on the ship, and we've remained friends ever since. But not just friends. My mother was married to Heber, and after she passed away, Heber ended up marrying Karen and bringing her into the family, and because we still stayed connected with Heber. So Karen came in as my stepmother, and I'd go on liberties, or I'd go down to LA and I'd go hang out with Karen and Heber. And she had Alexander, and he was like my little brother. So we became a very close family. And when I go to LA, I stay with her, and she stays with me on her visits to Vegas. So it's a strong connection, and we have many laughs together. And let's bring her on now. Let's bring on Karen.
Okay. Hi, Karen. How you doing?
Thank you. Hi, Mark. Hi, Jenny. Hello, everybody.
Hi, Karen. So let's get into this, huh? Now, you're a class, when you were in Scientology, you were one of the highest level auditors and case supervisors, which was class 12. So if you can explain to our audience, let's start at the beginning and go up each of the classes as to what each class obtained as an auditor, so they can understand that and what the auditing level was. And then we will go into who those class 12s were.
Well, each level of training corresponds with the bridge. So if grade 0 was to handle communication, your grade 0 auditor and your grade 0 CS could manage that level. So it just parallels. If it's class 4, your service facsimiles, that means your fixed ideas, this filter that gives you a bias, to put it in just simple terms. What is a surfer? That's grade 4. So grade
and as a class 4 auditor, you can now audit grade 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Yes. Everything below you is
right.
Because you're only able to get to 4 because you did 0, 1, 2, 3.
Right.
It's a bridge. It's a setup of every level empowering more, because you did the studies of what was below that rank.
Right.
People did get wins on doing this. However, I'm going to come straight out and say the wins were not sustainable. You will see people with the biggest surfax in the world, the Grant Cardones, and who's this other guy who's about to be arrested? they operate with Surfax, but they're OTAs. So they may have had a nice little win originally, but I want to tell you that all these levels, even the L's, boom.
Right. And in Scientology, isn't that called a bypass case?
Yes, they've learned to monetize that. Go back and do everything all over again. Some OT8s have been told that you are to redo your, let's say the OT8 is back on OT7 solo, doing solo, right? And they go, I'm fed up with auditing my BTs. I'm really not getting anywhere on this. It's like an ocean that I am handling with a teaspoon. I don't want to do this anymore. They go, oh, you're a bypass case. The only reason you want to do this and talk like this is your lower bridge is not in. Therefore, at your expense, we're going to overhaul everything from objective survival rundown, the drug rundown, redo everything. And you have to pay. So they don't look at it as, well, what was the CS? And how come qual approved? Because you go through qual to a test. How come they don't correct erroneous adjudication within? You must pay again to do the bridge again. Mm-hmm.
I was going to say, David Miscavige called me a bypass case right before he beat me up.
Whoa.
Because I claimed that I wanted freedom. Why do you want to leave the Sea Org? I said, freedom. And he goes, you're a bypass case. And I went, no, you don't understand what I'm talking about.
Exactly.
Good answer.
What the purpose is you're supposed to end up free. I mean, that's what we're all working for, was freedom.
Right. But in actuality, you get more and more trapped. The way they act out, whether that was originally intended or not, that's another debate, but you actually get more and more trapped. The claws are there to entrap you further and further. Mm-hmm.
Right. And I remember when I got my power auditing, which was grade 5 and 5A, that was audited by a class 7 auditor.
Yes.
Because the class 6 auditors were the briefing course, and that's where they did the wall of tapes and basically summarized and redid 0 to 4 and became better auditors.
Yes, correct.
Okay. So then after 5 and 5A being delivered by a class 7 auditor, not every auditor became class 7. They went from 6 to 8.
Right.
Is that correct? Okay.
That is correct. Class 7 was snatched away. There was a time where public could do class 7, and the one strength American Saint Hill, known as ASHO, had was they could deliver power, right?
Right.
And that was snatched away because they made class 7 only Sea Org or only Sea Org staff
auditors,
could do
yes.
class 7. And then they made class 8 also only Sea Org. A friend of yours called Aida. You know Aida?
Yeah.
Good old Aida. She's lovely. She was on course on a check sheet in the class 8 course where they said, course is closed. It's over. No more class 8. Out. In the middle of her study. Can you imagine that? I mean, everything against what Hubbard would have wished. So she was kicked out, and the class 8 course room at AOLA was closed down. Never to be opened.
What was class 8? What was class 8? Because that was a big deal, right? On the ship, right? I mean, we've interviewed Bell and some other people that your mother, right, Janis, was on the original class 8 course. So what was the difference between class? Well, obviously we just talked about 7, but what was a class 8?
Class 8 was a series of 2-hour lectures which went on for 2 weeks. And in the lectures, you may have heard the famous tape number 10 where he talks about Xenu and the volcanoes and that whole story. He goes into great depth on the story. That's tape number 10 of the Class 8 tapes. But basically, he became more and more ruthless. And he talked about smashing, pulverizing auditors that made an error, to have no mercy. Or errors were not mistakes, they were intentional. And this was when he started throwing people overboard for making an auditing error, right? Well,
yes,
that's a manifestation of what was going on in the lectures. You go back and you crack a whip on Outtech, and you just it became, he empowered the first Class 8 students to be tyrants. So there were all these 2-hour lectures, and a lot of them they call like ethics and conditions, and they have names of. So Hubbard went through what I don't know what happened to him in 1968 to make him anti-benign, anti-tolerant. But these are people who are coming to study his work. They're dedicated. They're giving up a lot. They came there they really didn't come there to be thrown overboard. Who was that wonderful lady who, God, I wish I didn't go blank on names. The wonderful lady who in the 50s was right beside Hubbard. She wrote a few issues.
Virginia Downsboro?
No. She was on the original Class 8 course. Anyway, she couldn't swim. And she was hurled overboard. And the next day she packed up her stuff, she fled the Apollo, and she fled all of Scientology. Since this is not live, I'm going to send you pictures of her with Hubbard at parties and stuff like that. Mm-hmm.
Okay, good.
So anyway, Class 8 was, you audit perfectly or else.
So Class 8 was not a level that matched with the processing. It was more of a perfecting the auditor.
Yes. Correct.
Right. Okay.
And going extensively into OT3.
Right. Right. So that was more of your auditors for auditing OT3 PCs, were you Class 8s?
Exactly.
Karen, let me ask you a question. Was it, if there was a correction that needed to be done on somebody doing OT3 and the Xenu and the BTs and all that, was it a Class 8? Was that one of the things they did, was like corrections on solo auditors and things like that?
Exactly. In fact, you couldn't do OT3 repair if you hadn't done the Class 8 course.
Got it.
That was a prerequisite.
Good. All right. So now then there was 9, 10, 11, and 12. Mm-hmm. And at this time, 9 was not a NOTS auditor, a Medford OT's auditor.
Yeah.
But 9 was that included as part of the L's?
No, not really. 9 was just a complete overview of how do you handle resistive cases? How do you handle those who will not make it? Just a complete broadshoot of everything you've learned and how to upgrade that. And I'm summarizing it in a nutshell. Yes.
Sounds like the case cracker rundown. Remember that? The case cracker.
Yes. Yeah.
We're going to crack your case. We've gotten this far and you haven't really made any gains. So now we're really going to crack it.
Even if we have to crack your skull and fracture it.
That's right.
You know.
Right.
Okay. So then the next levels was L for auditing was L10, 11, and 12. And those could be done on anyone, no matter what their case level was.
L stands for level.
Oh, no, L for list.
A list? Okay.
Yeah.
It drove case supervisors crazy because they kept changing, flip-flopping the prerequisites to get your L's. At one point, you were told, as long as they've done grades up to grade 4 release, they've done their expanded grades, they can have Ls. Oh, that was all
Right.
canceled. No. They have to be through the OT3 band, the non-interference area. And then they looked at how much money they were losing, because there's a slow dribble up to, no, class, flip-flop back. As long as you're grade 4, you can have it. Then you can have it after power. Then you can have it after OT3, but not before you start knots. It just kept changing when else, and it was a lot to do with gross income. And
I was going to say it was a real moneymaker for Flag.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously the Apollo, I think, but when it came to Clearwater, I remember that's what people were coming for their L's, and I think they were like $10,000 a piece or something. It wasn't super duper expensive. It was expensive.
On the Apollo, it was $2,500 an L. $7,500, you got all 3 L's.
Yeah.
But Jani, you didn't go L10, although that's lower numerically. You didn't get L10. You first studied L11. And if I could tell you a short little anecdote here, L11 was basically where L11 evolved because of the guy who tried to kill LRH. Bruce Welch. It's Bruce Welch's story.
Right.
What was the name of L11? Do you remember?
A New Life.
Okay.
That's New Life Rundown. And Bruce had this urge to kill Hubbard. And the main question of L11, if you study Bruce's, which we all did very, very thoroughly, step by step, it's really trying to pull your crimes, your overts and withholds. And then the magical question, what evil purpose do you have? Now, just take a look at this. The general population do not have a case like Bruce Welch. They don't want to go around and kill anyone, leave alone L. Ron Hubbard. So this was when people get onto L11 after having had 200 hours of FPRD, where they've run their false purpose rundown over and over, they're overchanged there. Because when you false purpose rundown is going down an overchain, and then when the chain ends, earlier similar, you go, what evil purpose precipitated those overts? So what was your intention for doing all these overts? People didn't know that when they purchased L11, now it costs $30,000, $40,000. They're really running Bruce Welch's case.
Right. But the false purpose rundown didn't come out for years
later
after.
Yes, that's true, but it was out in the 1980s.
Right.
Els was in the 70s, 80s, and then from the 80s to 2024, the whole bridge has become mostly a grade 2. Give up your overts, give up your crimes. In fact, people now sometimes have to buy a sec check and get through a sec check to even have an L.
Right.
Can you believe that? Your sec. What is the security?
Well, if you think about it, that's Miscavige. I mean, they're so afraid of being sued and, having people get on these materials and, become enemies, that all they want to do is find their crimes, and they want to have blackmail material on these people, to be honest with you,
Well, I also remember when they were coming out with the OT8, or maybe it was a little earlier than that, but I remember a discussion with DM, and I believe it was Ray Midoff at the time, a whole discussion on having the solo auditors on OT7 come in for 6-month checkups.
Yeah.
Now, this I do not know that it was LRH, and I don't think it would be, because when you're on OT7, you're pretty much doing a lot of the same as OT3.
Yes.
which is considered interference zone, which means if you're in the middle of OT3, then no one was to touch you with a sec check or anything because it was
Correct.
non-interference.
Absolutely.
So the fact that on OT7 and even on OT6 that these people are being pulled in and doing 6-month sec checks is in violation of the non-interference zone.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It costs $5,000 easily just to be on solo notes.
Right.
They're now charging you for CSing. You've got to pay something like $1,250 a month, $1,250 a month just to be CS'd her. Then when you arrive, oh God, are you hit on by every entity? Pay us for the new LRH library and CCHR and, you know, every entity that registers for money, the new building, ID logs, blah, blah, blah. But even if you get away with not giving them a lot of money, you now have to pay for the sec check.
Right.
And people bog sometimes on the sec check, and it goes to a correction list, and then they have to buy another intensive. There are a lot of posts on the internet where people gave up on OT7 just because they couldn't keep up with the extra $5,000 a year. And then you're not told that when they put you on the level. You're not told.
Right.
You're going to come twice a year. And this is going to cost you $5,000 minimum. Could be $5,000 a pop twice a year by the time Flag is done with you.
Mm-hmm. Right. And that was a Miscavige making it up in order to have a money maker.
Revenue.
They weren't getting money from people solo auditing at home. Yes, Mom.
I love Jason Begay, the actor, when he came out and left Scientology and he did his interview with Mark Bunker. I love how he said, like, oh, well, you're going to have to go back and redo your objectives or your lower bridge and all that because there were mistakes made. And he goes like, well, good. Are you guys just going to go fix it? He goes, oh, no, you have to pay for it. You have to pay for the mistakes that we made. You know what I mean? It wasn't like, oh, we made a mistake. It's a factory warranty. We're pulling you back in and we're going to fix it at our own cost. No. You're paying for our mess up. You know what I mean? It's just, it was ridiculous. Yeah,
well, that's just like David Miscavige changing what LRH said a floating needle was.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's who is David Miscavige to a Scientologist compared to who is L. Ron Hubbard to a Scientologist?
Right.
A guy who punched his own PC when he was trying to. That's who David Miscavige was. What I want to tell you that there's a lot of, I don't know how to word this, so I'm pausing a lot. There's a lot of misinformation on Quentin, and I would love to clarify some things.
Can we? Can we finish? I just want to finish first. We can do that. We want to do that, but I still want to find out what's L11 and what's L12.
Okay, so L11.
Sorry, L10. We didn't do that either.
L10 is more OWs. Almost everything on L10 is asking for overts and withholds. Now, in the 70s, this was quite a novelty. People lived their lives. No one had asked them, what have you done? What are you withholding? It was still quite a new idea. And the fact that you could just come clean and give up all these secrets you had and give up little things you'd fudged and all. This was quite...
what was it called? Because I remember it was very popular. It was like L10. You got to get L10. You know, I mean, that was a big one.
Yeah. I can't recall... L10, freedom from, I don't think it's freedom from overtime, but freedom from something or other. And you go through a list on every dynamic, asking for overts on that dynamic. That's why I'm telling you it's all overts and withholds. And these are long lists, some of them 176 questions. Now, when you give a noun, as you answer these overt and withhold questions, those nouns are culled. And the double whammy is you run overts and withholds on those nouns. So first of all, you're giving up huge, just 170, just every squeaky little time track and hidden thing of yours, you give up in these questions. But let's say you say, I got so angry with the postman because he hurled the package over the fence. Now, postman is circled. And when you come to the end of the list, you go, what have you done to the postman? What have you withheld from the postman? So it's nothing but overts and withholds. Now, this might have been a bit of a novelty back then. But in the last 20, 30 years, people have battle fatigue on overts and withholds. It's just so much. Every time they hit, even if they're public, they were sent to ethics, write up your overts. This is drained out of them in terms of overrun. Cleaning a clean. And then the L10 had some really good questions, just a few, a small sprinkling, like the lie rundown. What is the biggest lie that you were made to believe? What is the biggest lie you made another person believe? Then flow 3, others made it, and then flow 0. What lie did you make yourself swallow or believe? People love the lie rundown. Then, there's the greatest overt motivator rundown, which is, what is the biggest overt you ever did to another on the whole track? Ever. People love that question. What is it that you did? What is the biggest overdone on you on the whole track? Blah, blah, blah. All 4 flows, right?
Right.
So it has a small sprinkling, maybe 4 of these delightful questions on all flows. Other than that, it's overts and withholds.
I was going to mention in 1976, when I came and joined the Sea Org, and David Miscavige was my roommate. He had just joined about 30 days before that. I'll never forget, because the Source magazine, which was the magazine for the Flag Land Base, it had a photograph on it, on the cover, of his sister Denise standing next to a guy named Cooper Rounds. This blonde,
I remember.
Good-looking young guy.
Danny knows Cooper.
Next to
I
Denise,
know Cooper.
Yeah.
Pointing out off the balcony of the Fort Harrison, right? And Cooper was some rich guy, and he was a public person, right? And I'll never forget, DM looked at it and he goes, can you believe this? This guy's done L10, 11, and 12, and all he wants to do is chase around a little white ball. He wanted to be a professional golfer, I guess, at the time. And so, like, he was cutting him down. DM was saying, oh, yeah, he should be joining the Sea Org like everybody else, and he just wants to chase a white ball. I'll never forget that.
And the fact that the top of the totem pole would just diss a public he had just scammed out of tens of thousands of dollars. Maybe not scammed, but in his viewpoint, the else did nothing because he still wanted to play golf. Yeah, that's David Miscavige.
Yeah.
So then the L's, the L10, 11, and 12, they had to be delivered by you were a class 10, class 11, class 12.
First, you became class 11. It was done 11, 10, 12.
Got it.
Right. So, and they were supposed to correspond with be, do, have. L12 got into different identities of you, and Hubbard kind of whispered, you're really blowing BTs. All these identities, they're just BTs. So Hubbard had already started fixating. There are 2 tapes that are only available to class 12s. And he starts off tape number 1, and he said, okay, I'm going to let my hair down. I'm talking to class 12s here. Here's the real turkey. And in that, he says how L12 is basically, he said, and the magic is you can do it on little low class 4s, and they don't even know you're blowing their BTs.
By getting rid of the identities.
Yes.
Or the out of valence.
Another funny thing I was going to mention, Janis, you mentioned the non-interference zone, which is when you're
Yeah.
auditing these BTs and clusters to get rid of them either on NED for OTs or on OT3, right? You're not supposed to be interfered with that, right? But I can remember that, you'd be getting processed and asked questions like overts and withholds and things like that. And if it wouldn't blow or go away, Karen, you'll know this, they would then assess whether or not whatever it was that you did was yours, a BT's, or a cluster's. And whichever read, that is what it was, that would be indicated to you. So you could be talking about something that you can't, from whatever, something, on a starship or moon or whatever. And then all of a sudden you get it assessed. Well, is that yours, a BT's or a cluster's? Never read on a BT's or clusters. It would be indicated to you, and then it would blow and go away. So you could assign things that you were saying to these body thetans and clusters attached to you. Well, when we were getting sec checked, towards the end with Miscavige, if you came up with overts and withholds and things like that you made up, you couldn't assign them. Oh no, that's not allowed. I remember because there were crazy things I thought of that would read and all that, and I go, I think that's a BTs or clusters. So no, we're sorry, we're not taking those. And that would spin me in. It would actually spin me in because I really believed BTs and clusters at that time. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Wow. Yes, Mark.
Yeah.
I hear you. In fact,
Okay.
the whole of OT8, which just makes people crash and burn, is at the end of OT8. Towards the end of OT8, they're told everything you've ever run in all of Scientology, all your L's, this was all run on BTs and clusters. None of this was your real case. Now we're going to find out who you really are, because you weren't any of these things, right? So, and that just caves people in. Wow, I paid $100,000 for a freeload of BT to get his L11 and then take off into the atmosphere, and I paid for his L.
Yeah.
They sort of.
And what a lot of people don't know is when Hubbard passed away and they decided they were going to come out with a new OT level, it was like, okay, Ray Midoff, he had to go through whatever notes he could of Hubbard's and put it together. It wasn't something Hubbard had already laid out like he had other things. So basically what OT8 was what Ray Midoff, who the only time he met Hubbard was when Hubbard was dying and he was auditing him his last sessions. But Ray had to kind of just figure it out and say, okay, I think this is what it is. Because I remember Ray telling me when it was being released, oh, I hope I did it okay. I mean, he was sweating, wondering if he did it right or not.
Well, there's many versions of OT8, but you're absolutely right.
And
Hubbard's folders were culled, and Ray had to look at what kind of stuff Hubbard did in solo, and he culled out bits and pieces, and that's OT8. But when it bombed, then it was redone, and there's 5 OT8s got together. So many people cross over now, and they coordinated and told each other stories, and these were 5 different versions. Hubbard would never bring out an OT level where there's different editions. You either do the level or you don't, but there's not variations of it. But in OT8, whatever Ray did the first time and then re-revised and
Okay. All right. So now that we have established what these different levels are.
May I just finish the be-do have? The be-do have of the L's. Okay.
Yes.
So if you continuously give up all your overts and withholds like you do on L10, your havingness is higher because you don't have to restrain yourself. You can now let loose. You're not going to commit OWs. That's the theory. So that's have level. B is L12 because you're constantly handling identities, beingnesses, although they turn out to be just fake BTs, but that's the B, right? And do is L11 because you're doing these homeworks. You're into the do level of your existence. Like, what's his name?
Cooper
Bruce.
Rounds.
Like, Cooper.
Bruce. Sorry.
Bruce.
Cooper was a bit of a boyfriend to Jenny.
Oh, really?
And,
I didn't know that.
yeah.
You
were talking.
I had a big crush on Cooper on the ship.
I think a lot of the messengers did, because I think Denise, Dave's sister, did as well.
Yeah, well, she was never a messenger.
No, but I'm just saying, just young girls. He was a very good-looking guy.
Oh yeah, extremely good looking. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful blonde from Santa Barbara, Montecito, family with a lot of money. What happened to the Rounds? Have they departed Scientology?
I don't know. I think Cooper is still in. That's what I was told about a year ago. He was still being a good Scientologist. And I don't know about Becky and Doug and Bob.
Now, is this true that the Rounds' fortune was based off of Coleman camping equipment? I'd heard that story. Is that not true?
That's the mother.
Coleman. Like if you ever buy a Coleman thermos or a Coleman ice chest, that's the Rounds. That's Cooper Rounds' mother's family. That's how they made the money.
Well, Jenny, I get sent every magazine, every publication under the sun that they put out, always shipped to me. And I never see any of the Rounds show up at Flag, because they show pictures of who's at Flag now in all these publications. The Rounds do not show up at Flag. So maybe he's theoretically a Scientologist, but he's not active at all. Cooper's.
I got another one, like Coleman equipment, camping equipment. That's the fortune for the Rounds, right?
Yes.
Well, remember Bill Church. He's Church's fried chicken, which is all over the South. Church's chicken was Bill Church, who was a Scientologist.
Yeah, I did his L's, Bill Church's L's.
Yeah.
Now, Bob Rounds had an OT3 pack he left in his car, and the OT3 pack was stolen.
His car was broken into, and everything in the car was stolen, not just his OT3 pack.
Yeah, but But in relation to my story, it's only the OT3 that the church cared about. They could care less about general robbery. So this was just a huge flap. And I remember how the top execs at FSO were not losing OT3 to the... Now it's all on the internet. You can find OT3 in a heartbeat, all the commands, Xenu, blah, blah, blah. But in those days... it was like the roof fell in to have OT3 out in the world. However, the Rounds had cash. They were wealthy, and they weren't willing to pummel Bob Rounds to the... they just could not. So you see, wealth entered the factor of ethics.
Yeah, and
go, Jenny, go.
Let me tell the story on what really happened with Bob. Yes, his car got broken into. The Guardian's office was all over him. He wanted to come to the ship where Cooper was and continue his auditing there, and even do his OT3 there, because then he was no longer a security risk because he'd be on the ship. No one would approve it. I went to LRH, to Hubbard, and I told him the story of what happened, and the Guardian's office was stopping Bobby from doing his OT3. So that's when Hubbard said, tell them that he can come to the ship and do his OT3. So that's how Bobby ended up on the ship where Cooper already was getting auditing. And then later on, the years passed, and Bobby Alberton got back on lines and continued. And then years later, I was on the Free Winds as the commanding officer, and I ran into Doug Rounds, who was the husband of Becky, and we were merrily talking, and he wasn't telling me there was any issues or anything. And then after I left the Sea Org, I called Bobby, because to try and sell him some prints so I could have some money. And Bobby was telling me that this whole thing with his car being broken into and losing OT3 was stopping him from going to the free wins. And I was like, sorry, I can't help you now. But if you'd told me, or if Doug had told me while I was at the free wins, I would have ordered you directly there, because I know that's what LRH would have done. And that's the last time I talked to him.
Interesting story. Yeah.
Yeah.
So do we want to go on to let you tell about, you said you wanted to clarify some things about Quentin Hubbard, who he was a class 12, right?
Yes.
Well, Mark, what I'd like to do.
Go ahead, Janis. You go ahead.
Yeah. What I'd like to do is, right now, we've now established what that is the auditing of 12s. Class 12s were the highest level of auditors, or still is the highest level of auditors in Scientology. And what we're going to do right now is we're going to go to the original class 12s, who are all trained personally by Hubbard on the Apollo. I'm not talking about the class 12s who are now auditing at the Flag Land Base and have been doing it for all these years. We're going to go through one by one the original class 12s that Hubbard worked with. And so I wanted to start with, there we go.
Otto Roos. Yeah, sorry.
Otto Roos. Otto Roos, he seemed to have led the group of class 12s, and he became a CS, and he was a trusted auditor. I don't remember him ever auditing Hubbard, but he was used as a case cracker. And when Hubbard was having trouble with his own auditing, Otto said, well, I will get with all the other class 12 auditors, and we're going to do a folder error summary of all your PC folders. So they then got into a whole thing of hunting down Hubbard's PC folders from England and from Washington, D.C., and they were bringing them all to the ship. And Otto and his group of class 12s were going through these because they were the top auditors. And with that group would have been Jeff Walker.
Here, I'll go. I'll find it. You just said the name. I'll find it.
Okay, yeah, Jeff Walker.
Hold on.
Because Jeff had actually been on the ship, and he was an engineer on the Apollo, on the Royal Scotsman. He came from New Zealand, and he was an engineer. And during his study time, he would train as an auditor. He trained up to class 4. He then did his class 6 while he was in the engine room. And then he was able to move in and become a full-time auditor. Karen, did you want to say something?
Well, why you mentioned Otto, wasn't Otto one of the first people Hubbard punched in the jaw when the
She's getting to that.
Oh, sorry.
You jumped the gun.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I thought we had left Otto and we're going on to other 12s.
No, well, we're going to the other 12s that were helping Otto.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who's next, Janis?
So next is David Mayo, and there's David. He actually later became the case supervisor on the ship. So he was over all the 12s and so forth. But at that time, Otto had already been beached and kicked off the ship. And then Meryl Mayo was David's wife, and she had been auditing and trained up to a 12. And it was this group along with Quentin Hubbard.
Hold on. I'm getting the picture.
Okay. And there's Quentin. And we will come back to talking about Quentin after I finish this other story with Otto. Anyway, so these group of auditors all sat down and they were FES in Hubbard's folders. And there was a message run wondering, well, why are you going through my folders? And it was like, well, and Otto pulled out this thing showing that he had sent it up to Hubbard, and Hubbard approved it, that they go through the folders and find out and, do up a list so they can find out what is wrong and correct it. But in there, Otto mentions and finds, going through the folders, the letters RS. which means rock slam. And rock slam means using the Scientology e-meter, means there's supposed to be an evil purpose behind every rock slam. So basically, Otto is saying that Hubbard has evil purposes because of these RSs in his PC folder. So Hubbard hits the roof, and he's like, he's lost it. He's ballistic. I'm now running back and forth to Otto to find out what makes you think Hubbard has RSs. And he's showing me in the PC folders where it says RS, in Hubbard's own writing and in Mary Sue's writing. So I'm running these messages back, and then Otto knows it is heated. So he decides to follow me back up there and make sure I'm delivering the message correctly back to Hubbard. And Otto just follows me right into Hubbard's office. And Hubbard gets up, and Mary Sue by this time comes running in, and she's in the office. And LRH starts yelling at Otto that he doesn't have any rock slams. And Mary Sue's like, how dare you say he has rock slams? I was his auditor. That he doesn't have evil purposes. Anyway, LRH actually went to take a swing at Otto, who luckily ducked it and got out of its way. But it got pretty explosive. And then Otto later on, he's down below decks, and Diana Hubbard comes down and yells at him, I hate you. And it's like everyone was ganging up on Otto, who was simply trying to help. Anyway, Otto ends up being offloaded, kicked out. And even years later, Hubbard and I are looking down on the dock, and there's someone down there talking at the bottom of the gangway. It was Otto. He'd been in the port, and he came to say hello, and LRH was like, nope. He didn't want anything to do with him, and he went right back into his office. He didn't wave or anything or greet him. Anyway, so that's what happened to Otto. But meanwhile, there's all these other class 12s, and we'll go to Quentin now, and Karen can tell her story on Quentin.
Okay. On Otto, he did A to E twice. The Guardian's office told him, go ahead and do A to E and we'll look at the forgiveness. But the Guardian office just wanted Otto to write up all his secrets and overts and wither. It was a complete... And after he finished A to E once, they said, got to do A to E again.
Right, so let's tell people what A to E is.
Okay.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Karen.
A to E means you do steps A, B, C, D, E. And each step is taking a sword and plunging it through your heart to beg forgiveness and to be put back in good standing. Now, step A is paying cash. I think it's either A or B. What is this? Cash. Give the church a beautiful donation. Just give them a donation that will make them gasp. Max every credit card. Pay off anything so one step is just money, pure money. Another step is write up every crime you've ever done, even if you think it wasn't a big deal. We want to know about it. So the cult has everything you've ever done. That's B. C is C is disconnecting from anyone who might openly in front of the ethics officer writing disconnect notes to anyone who may be borderline disaffected, whatever. Then the next step is train from, and then you're given a huge train. It might even include the whole of the briefing course, but you have to just train. Again, that's cash. You've got to pay for. So these are all the steps to do to beg the cult to let you get back in. And Otto did this twice. Mm-hmm.
Now, step A, I don't remember that as being cash. I always remembered that as you had to do some sort of big amends or do something to make a difference to make up for the damage that you did being an SP. So
you're right, absolutely right. I don't guarantee that I have the sequences right. I was just giving the essence of what could be in the formulas.
Okay.
I haven't looked at that kind of stuff in years, and I don't.
Yeah.
So you're right. It's not.
Yeah, because I think some people were like, "Oh, if I get a major celebrity, and that would be my blow," and so they get a celebrity in, and then they finish off the rest of the steps.
But it's interesting. Even though they've been quite abused, they beg to get back in. There are people that do. Bill Yachty did A to E 3 times. Right? 3. So people are craving to be back into that. Some people. Yeah.
Yeah. I've been asked to do it and I won't.
Yeah. John Lundeen, a super reg at American St. Hill, did the first person known. He was in the Sea Org and he was made to do A to E while in the RPF. That's pretty wild.
Well, John Horwich actually was declared suppressive while at the Gold Base when Hubbard was still alive, and he was made to do A to E at the base because they didn't want to offload him because Roanne, his daughter, was there, which was Hubbard's granddaughter, and Diana was not in the Sea Org at the time. So they kept John at the base, and then I was the second person at the base who was declared. And no one was allowed to talk to me because I was a suppressive. But by doing my program that David Mayo had done up for me, that's when it was like they decided I didn't change. David had said, what was it? She was disaffected. She's no longer disaffected, but there's no guarantee she won't be disaffected in the future. So that's when they actually offloaded me declared, but then Hubbard found out and pulled me back and put me on the running program. So, but anyway, that's off track. So we were talking about A to E.
Yeah, we were going to talk about Quentin now because we're getting close to the end here. So we want to make sure that Karen can say what you like about Quentin Hubbard.
Yes.
Thank you. Quentin, the story started with a New Zealander called Grace Alp. Grace Alp was just a complete nightmare. She was terminal cancer. In fact, my reports on Grace Alp helped that became a non-qualification. If you're progressing towards terminal, you could just die off while you're being audited. And it looked, again, the PR thing of. So I was auditing Grace Alp every day. She'd red tagged on every session. I'm dying. She would wail back and forth. And then it was discovered that she had org hopped Sydney, Melbourne, Perth, and every time she got full refund. But there were no computers to give all the org's data. So nobody knew that she got services refunded. This was she was a scam. Anyway, it was misery for me because you can't count. You could never get a day off. You could never. So 5 hours a day of my life. This was soon after we landed in 75, early 76. I was locked in with Grace Alp. And then it turned out that she started befriending Quentin Hubbard. And the next thing I knew, she was sleeping in Quentin Hubbard's room at the Fort Harrison, not in his bed. Quentin would sleep on the floor with some blankets, and Grace Alp was in his bed. Talk about unusual bedfellows. Nobody could understand what was going on with Quentin. However, these red tags meant the Flag Service Org lost all their stats for that. If there was an unhandled red tag, stats were lost. Again, statistics. So it was decided to snatch Quentin from me, to snatch Grace Alp and give it to Quentin. Oh, what a relief, because I wasn't helping her and she was getting progressively worse. So Quentin started auditing Grace Alp, who was living in his bedroom. And in one desperate session, because she would wail and not be able to, she was incoherent, Quentin did something about implant poles where the Thetan got stuck to the pole. It's covered in some early implant tapes of Hubbard. And I don't know where or how Quentin even thought of implant poles, but apparently this was the final session. And she red tagged. And Quentin was sent to Dennis Ehrlich. And Dennis Ehrlich looked at these implant poles sticking and said, "This is squirrel. And I am pulling all your certs, and you are ordered to train from the bottom up." This was a complete mental collapse of Quentin. He just collapsed because training was, when you were put on training, it was 10 hours a day. You could listen to Hubbard. There was a wall of 365 briefing course tapes. You sat there till you went into vegetative state, listening to Hubbard's tapes 8 hours a day, every day, every day, every day. So Quentin, who wanted nothing more than to fly and be an aviation guy, looked at this future, this miserable future of having to train. Janis and I talked, and Janis brought up a good point. Ehrlich actually had no authority. You could only lose your certs by COMEV, right, Janis?
That's correct. Yes.
A committee of evidence could pull your certs. Whimsically, one person couldn't just decide you have no certs. And the next day, Quentin blew.
Right.
He wanted freedom. Even the symbolic flying that he constantly did was freedom. Get in a plane and be away from the sea.
Yeah.
So the next day, Quentin blew. And I challenge and know that it's just nonsense that there's some conspiracy to kill him because he was Hubbard's son and all. He voluntarily fled. And then the last part is the Las Vegas story of how he was found, the exhaust of his thing, and he was but he was alive. What's so heartbreaking was he was twitching and had mild seizures for days in this hospital, but he was a John Doe. He had absolutely no ID. Nobody knew who he was. There wasn't any trace of, so he could have theoretically been saved because while he was twitching and having the seizures in Las Vegas hospital, he was alive. And then finally he died. And Audie
they actually pulled the plug on him because he was in vegetated state at that point. Yes.
Right. And Audie Marin and Mary Rosonico of the GEO went to pick up the body.
Right. Well, let me add in here. Eddie Walters was a Class 8 auditor here in Las Vegas, and Eddie had mob connections. He was a pit boss at the Sands, and he used to hang out with the Rat Pack. Mm-hmm. And he himself was a well-known billiard player or pool player and was famous for that as a champion. Anyway, the Guardian's office used Eddie to deal with all the officials in Las Vegas because of his connections. Mm-hmm. But Quentin had been found at the airport. He's parked his car where people park to watch the planes come and go. Mm-hmm. And that's where he died with, an exhaust into the car and the windows all closed up and everything, and the license plate and the ID of the car was all scratched off, and that's how he ended up as a John Doe. But yeah, Eddie Walters. Eddie was actually going to come on this show, but sadly he passed away. I saw him in October. He was going to come on the show. He just needed to handle a few things, and then he called me. He said he was sick. He needed to get well. He listened to my show every time we were on, and then he sadly passed away. And that's why I'm hurrying, trying to get some people interviewed so that we don't lose all that good information.
Yeah. That's very.
Well, we're at the end of the show right now, but we're gonna have you on again, Karen, if you don't mind, so we can talk more about the Class 12s and other things as well. How do you feel about that?
Yes, yeah, I'd love to. There's actually lots of little anecdotes, Jeff
Absolutely.
Walker and funny ones and this and that. But Quentin, I was Quentin's twin. Every day in the morning, you had to do TRs. The Class 12s, doesn't matter what class you had to do TRs. Quentin was my twin for a year and a half. Every morning, he and I sat and did TRs. I had to push Quentin's butt. I got to know him so well because of and then Chuck Ohl, I know you got less than a minute left. Chuck Ohl of Intelligence Investigation Geo sat me down for hours saying, Karen, you were with him. What are his buttons? Where would you have gone? I said, Chuck, he went to flying classes. Go to all the academies that teach flying. He blew and he went to learn to fly. That's my advice to Chuck.
Well, that's what Quentin told me he was going to go do when he left. He saw me just before he left. He came and told me, he says, I'm going to go and take some lessons. My mom and dad had paid for him.
Oh, wow.
He got them for his birthday and he'd never taken them. And that's what he was planning to do, but he ended up stopping in Vegas and never left from there.
Right.
Okay. Thank you very much, Karen. We appreciate you being here.
It's fun.
And just want to let everybody know, please subscribe to our channel. Hit that like button. Really appreciate it. It helps get out the word. More people can watch. If you have any questions or comments on anything that we've discussed here today, go down in the comments section and please write them there. We check them routinely. And if you'd like to support our channel, there's a link in the description where you can buy us a coffee. It's just a way of making donations. You can buy us 1, 2, 5, 10, how many ever coffees you want. And it's just a cute way to do that. But we appreciate any support that we get for that. Is there anything else that you guys want to briefly mention before we end off?
I will just briefly mention that we will come back and do a part 2 and finish going through the rest of the 12s.
That's right. Karen, thanks very much for being here.
Thank you. You're both great hosts. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Bye-bye,
Karen.
Until next time, everybody.
Bye-bye.
We'll see you later.